Look, I get Freddy Gaudreau was having a great game, but putting him in an OT over Marco Rossi for a faceoff win was a choice. Minnesota Wild fall 3-2 in overtime to the New York Rangers, and it feels like a point that was squandered. We'll talk about the game as well as what's coming up as we get rolling here. Minnesota Wild, they get one. Felt like they should have got two. Let's postcast.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Minnesota Wild fall 3-2 in overtime to the New York Rangers. They do get one of the 2 points, but feels like, considering how the Rangers have played by and large this season, feels like the Wild should have grabbed 2 in that game. And it's not as though the Wild played particularly poorly in this game. I mean, Igor Shesterkin, I thought, had a tremendous game for the Rangers in net, but we are seeing in games like this, not being able to finish on shots is a gigantic problem for the Minnesota Wild. The Wild generated plenty of opportunities. They had an expected goals of 3.03. It felt like they had so many opportunities they just couldn't seal. Shots in close that were awry, shots from the faceoff circles that were inaccurate. Not having tried and true finishers in the lineup for this Wild team is certainly something that is quite a goal. And I want to go right to this from Big Ticket KG. Eye opener here. The Minnesota Wilds have scored 2 goals or fewer in 17 of their 31 home games. That, frankly, is inexcusable. I get that the Wild have had much better success on the road this year than they have at home, but you have to find a way in your home barn to be able to give the fans a reason to cheer. Is as quiet as a church mouse in the first period with the Wild scoreless against the Rangers. And if you want to quiet a home crowd when you're on the road, that's one thing, but that kind of style just doesn't that kind of style just isn't conducive to home play. Like, you got to find a way to go out and get that first goal. You got to find a way to do something to get the crowd going so that you can be energized as the game unfolds. And the Wild they have not been able to consistently do that throughout the course of the season. And you see people on Twitter say, well, I turn the game off. Like, I don't blame you, because it's not a sexy, flashy style of hockey that they play. And it does not play great at home, which is why the Wilds have not been able to score, but also the finishing. We'll talk plenty about that here as things roll along. Let's go through the stats here. Let's just go through the recap. Rangers had 31 shots on goal, and as we mentioned, the Minnesota Wild generated 3.03 expected goals in this game. The New York Rangers had a 2.24 expected goals, which again speaks to the defense doing their job and making things pretty difficult for the Rangers. Filip Gustavsson gave up 3 goals. So again, it comes down to, it seems, one goal that you would like to have back, and that goal has been one that the Wild offensively just have not been able to overcome. They haven't been able to get that back. 2021, 2022, you could get that every game. You could find a way to get that goal every game practically, but the struggles offensively make it so you just really don't have a ton of error as a goalie for this Minnesota Wild team. And Michael Russo talked about that as the game unfolded. Like, if you're Filip Gustavsson, you're worried that the next goal that you give up might be too much to overcome for this Minnesota Wild team. Now, credit to the Minnesota Wild for continuing to battle and putting themselves in position to tie things up and to keep this game going along. But again, it was a Rangers team that had come in and had lost 4 in a row. Yes, they're playing like there's no tomorrow, because for them, quite honestly, there isn't. But for the Minnesota Wilds, they should be playing with the same level of intensity, because every point that they don't pick up is a point closer to not being in the postseason, which is something that even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, we didn't think was even an option. And you find yourself now with I believe the updated total is 79 points. You're 8 points up, 7 points up on the teams behind you. And it's not great. So getting back to the numbers here, rare big W for the Minnesota Wild special teams, as the power play. Now, they did have a power play goal added, courtesy of Marcus Johansson, that I think was after the fact, but I'm not going to argue it. And the penalty kill was perfect against the Rangers power play. So a rare W night for the special teams. 5-on-5, just not able to get it done. And I said in the episode that we posted kind of right at the start of this game, I did not have a great feeling about this game going in, because it feels like one that the Wild were going to get lulled into a not testing the goalie enough against Shesterkin, and Igor stood on his head for quite a bit of the game. The Wild did bounce back to be able to tie it up, but you got to be able to finish some of those shots in close, and the Wild just did not do that consistently, and they have not done that consistently all season. Face-offs, Rangers throttled in the face-off circle. They had a sizable advantage in the hits department, and blocks pretty even, but not a ton of blocks for either team in this game here tonight. I want to go back to something that I found just odd in this game. And I know Freddy Gaudreau had himself quite the game. He scored a goal and really had just a solid game, and continues what has been a nice bounce back season for him. But going to him in the OT to try to win a faceoff, having Marco Rossi out on the ice and pulling him back and going with Gaudreau over Rossi, not a huge fan of that. Ironically enough, it ended up that Gaudreau did not win the faceoff. And then all of a sudden, you've got Boldy out there with Gaudreau and Faber. I'm not a huge fan of that. And there's been a lot of comments here tonight already about Brock Faber's play here recently, and we keep seeing the minutes numbers that he puts up, and he had just under 30 minutes in this game. I think that should be a little bit of a red flag, that just because a guy is capable of playing a heavy minute load doesn't mean that that's something you should just be relying on endlessly. It seems like he is kind of hitting a wall a little bit here at this point in the season. So I would like to see some spread. I mean, your third pairing played 11 minutes. You're telling me David Juracek couldn't come into this lineup and do that? So I don't know. My big takeaway from this game is just that it felt like the Wild squandered a point, and good comment from Goats and Rex in here just now that I'm going to get to later. So don't worry, Goat, Satan, Rex. I've got that one starred because we're going to get to that point here in a little bit. But that was my big takeaway. Obviously, the notable performances. Freddy Gaudreau had one of the goals tonight. Marcus Johansson had the other. And Marcus Johansson, I think because of the fact that he took a stick to the face, he seemed like he really had a bee in his bonnet in this one. But, just a lot of quiet performances in this game. One shot on goal for Matt Boldy in the game. You continue to throw your fourth line out there for 6 minutes. So Justin Brazeau has just about as many shifts as shots on goal since he was acquired by the Minnesota Wild. Gustav Nyquist did get his first helper with the Wild, but a lot of quiet performances in this game for the Minnesota Wild. And, very, very beatable New York Rangers team that they need every point that they can get, and they played like it. And I don't know, feels like a better start to this game might have given the Wild an opportunity to take the lead and to kind of, anytime you play teams like this, you have to take them out of it early. Like, you got to give them a reason to roll over. The Rangers have done it plenty this year. If you look at some of the scores of the games that they've played, they have had the tar beaten out of them multiple times this season. So all you have to do, it's a slow team, it's a veteran team. All you got to do is you got to take care of your business early on and knock them out of the game, and they'll tap. And they'll say, well, we just don't have it tonight. But if you let teams hang around, you let them stick in, and you turn it into a tight, physical back and forth game, well, then you're asking for trouble. And I say that full well knowing that the Minnesota Wild just are not capable of that with the pieces that they're missing in this lineup right now. They're not really capable of taking a team out behind the woodshed and taking care of business early so that they say, well, let's just play for the next night. It's a team that continues to struggle to score. They are stuck in a rut in which they have scored, below 3 goals frequently this year, and that's not enough to get it done, which is why this game went the way that it did. We have plenty to get to here in tonight's postcast. I want to talk about some of the thoughts. Really good one from Goat, Satan, Rex regarding the defensive pairings. So we'll talk about that. And we'll take your comments as well, of course. Back in the postcast saddle here as the Minnesota Wild fall 3-2 in OT, and we are just getting things started here tonight. Take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back with your comments right here on tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Today's postcast is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. So how can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. How do I know these sponsored posts works? Because when I was on the job hunt, those sponsored posts were the first ones that I saw. And my favorite part about Indeed is the way that they work to match your qualifications with the job requirements for particular positions. It's almost if they're taking 2 pieces of string and tying them together. And if I'm looking at a particular job, they may say, hey, are you fluent in this? Are you capable of this skill? And if you answer yes, that gives you a better chance to get matched up with that particular job. And now, if you are hiring, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Today's Locked On Wild postcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Your best play is those first in games of the NCAA tournament. The first four, go with one of those. Just coin flip, and whichever team you get, go with them to win. That's a great way to kind of chance your first bet. And if you win, then you're set for the entire NCAA tournament. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Minnesota Wild fall by a score of 3-2 in OT. And for the Wilds, they fall now to 37-24-5, 15-14-2 at home. And as we heard, the Wilds have scored 2 goals or fewer in 17 of the 31 games. Not great. Not great at all. I want to go back to the defense, though, because a point that Goat Satan Rex made when talking about why Brock Faber's getting played as much as he is, it means Hines doesn't trust 3 out of his 6 defensemen, and Faber is getting double and triple shifted. Great opportunity to fix that by getting David Jiricek in the lineup. We saw Jiricek put in position. You know, I think the thing that impressed most about Jiricek is, yes, he had some miscues, sure, if you're counting those. But I think the thing that impressed most is he just looked comfortable. Like, he looked the part. Is he a finished product? No. Does he give you way more upside than your current third pairing? Yeah, because he actually has offensive ability. The broadcast brought it up tonight. The production from the defenseman, by and large, has dried up for the Minnesota Wild over the last 16 games. Completely dried up, and that puts a lot of pressure on your offense. When your defense aren't capable of stepping into the play and letting it rip, then you're basically going forwards only. And if your forwards aren't capable of finishing on their shots, it's hard to score goals. And a good point here by Creepy Colors. Justin Brazeau had that one shot that he had was a dynamite feed from Brock Faber right across to the left side of the crease. And he tried for just the tap in goal. Couldn't get that to go. But other than that, he has been, he has either not played or he just has really not stood out. You know what happens tonight? Let me tell you. I know the Boston Bruins lost in their game to the Ottawa Senators, but Marat Kuznetsov scored a goal. He played 17 minutes in this one, and I do believe the Bruins have shifted him to a wing position, but as I'm going to go actually to a note from one of my group chats. Friend of the show, Dan Bradley, with a pretty astute observation about Marat Kuznetsov. Listen to this. Marat Kuznetsov had 45 5-on-5 offensive zone starts through 57 games in Minnesota this year, less than 1 per game. He has already had 8 through 2 games in Boston, which would put him on pace for 228 offensive zone starts over 57 games. If Boston keeps using him like that, the offensive numbers are going to pop. So basically what it tells you is that the Minnesota Wild didn't have a ton of trust in Kuznetsov to do really anything offensively. but they also didn't try him in those situations. And the Bruins, who obviously are pretty out of the playoff picture, they are playing for the future. The Bruins, interestingly enough, after all their trade deadline moves, they have now the second youngest roster in the NHL. Can you guess who's tied for the oldest? Take a guess. Take a guess at who's tied for the oldest roster in the NHL. I'll give you a hint. The Minnesota Wild are tied with the Edmonton Oilers for the oldest roster in the NHL. And not only old, but very, very slow. Slow team. Not a ton of foot speed for this Wild team, which means that, you don't get as many of those breakaway opportunities, those odd man rush opportunities. Marcus Foligno had one tonight, and he got chased down from behind on a shorthanded an odd man rush opportunity. I think it was a 2-on-1. He got chased down from behind, and his shot attempt went errant, went wide left. If you get an opportunity to have a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2 or something like that, you got to be able to close on those. I don't know how to tell you this, but the only way to be able to do that is with speed or with some crisp passing. There's some good passes tonight, but yeah, not great. Boston has the luxury of being down for a few years and drafting high because they're a legacy team. They have multiple cups. They don't have Craig. Please fill the house, Leopold, as an owner. And their previous GM got them in some big trouble with that roster makeup. That Boston roster was older at one point than the Minnesota Wilds currently are, and now they're going to have to dig through that here for a few seasons, to say the least. But yeah, it would be interesting to get Braden back and put Juracek and him together and drop the bottom pair. Trust me, I would love all this. I would love to say, okay, Marcus Johansson, you're going to be a third or a fourth line guy. Third pair is going to get broken up. I would love to see all of that, but GM, and I really don't know. I've kind of toyed with this at points this season. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going full tinfoil hat. It kind of feels like, tell me if I'm crazy here. I'll just throw this out here because why not? Tell me if I am crazy. It kind of feels like there's at least some input being put out there by the GM as to where particular players sit in the lineup. Feels crazy to say, but I look at some of these things that happen with this roster, and they don't make sense. They don't make sense. They don't jive with what we have seen for a large portion of the season. How else can you explain Marcus Johansson just being stapled, not even stapled, welded to the second line? The third pairing being welded together, despite having multiple instances where they just don't look the part. Like, I've screamed that the third pairing does not match up with what the statistics say. It just doesn't look to be as effective as the analytics say that it is. So I think there definitely is at least some suggesting, because I know we're gonna say John Hines does not like to play the rookies. He may not be the one that has a say in how that plays out. Because think about how many times this year the Wild have put a particular lineup together and it has changed during the game. I do believe that John Hines is a good coach. It just feels like there is some hands-on stuff that is going on with the lineup. So I don't know. I do have tinfoil if anybody wants me to go get some, but I don't know, because like I said it early on in the season, I tweeted it out. I think John Hines is an effective coach for sure. I just also think that he's kind of squeezed as much as he can out of this lineup with the constraints that they have. And let's keep this in mind too, like is the same thing under Billy with Dean Evison. And Dean Evison is getting rave reviews for the job that he's doing with Columbus right now. He has Columbus right now in the thick of a playoff spot. And, you know, you look at what, let's just look at how things are playing out for that Columbus team right now. It's obviously it's not one of the top end teams in the league, but you know, Adam Fantilli's a young player. He's got 21 goals this season. Zach Werenski, who was kind of a he's kind of a bounce around defenseman, is one of the best defensemen now in the Eastern Conference. He's got 20 goals as a defenseman. Kirill Marchenko, another young player, he's 24 years old. He's got 25 goals this season. So you mean to tell me that Dean hates putting rookies in positions to succeed? Dmitry Voronkov, 24 years old. He's got 20 goals. And obviously the Blue Jackets have better young talent than the Wild do, but there are some vets on that team. There are a lot of rookies, and it seems like the rookies are doing just fine. Is the Wild starting to be a Dallas Cowboys situation where the owners and the GM get too involved with the coaching when they're not coaches? Well, I hope it doesn't get to that point, because in the limited amount of knowledge I have regarding the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones is nauseatingly involved. Like he's coaching the team. He is the GM of the team. He's the owner of the team. He has tendrils all the way down to the underground parking underneath the team facility. Like that's too much power for one person to have. And I think what we see and what we know is that Billy just tends to be a little stubborn. And it's kind of my way or the highway. So I kind of wonder if, you know, Hines puts the lineup card together and Billy comes down from the box and looks it over and says, like, remember Moneyball? Where Brad Pitt as Billy Beane was making lineup decisions for whatever the name of the manager that Philip Seymour Hoffman was playing. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, who obviously is the manager, would say like, oh, I'm playing such and such player at first. And the GM would say, no, you're not. To the point that then he traded that particular player so that the coach couldn't play him. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but it just like there's stuff that happens. There's stuff that happens from like the lineups being posted to the actual game, and then from day to day, that just doesn't really jive. I don't know, but you know, it's It's going to be, if you think this is going to be anything other than an absolute dogfight the rest of the way, I'm sorry, but this is going to be fight and claw and scratch every single day. The Wild have currently an 8-point lead in the wild card picture, but the Calgary Flames have 2 games in hand on the Wild. So you win one of those and all of a sudden you're 6 points back. And look at what the Wild have coming up. They play the Blues on Saturday. By the way, I unfortunately will not be able to do any postcasting on Saturday because I'm making my collegiate hockey play-by-play debut for the Minnesota State Maverick men's hockey team. So I will be doing that right while the game is going on. So no postcast on Saturday. Next week, state tournament boys basketball. We'll see if we can sneak one in, but look at these games coming up. And your homestand, by the way, right now, you are 1-1 on a critical 7-game homestand. You got St. Louis on Saturday, Los Angeles Kings, who you have absolutely had your face caved in by the Kings in 2 meetings this season. Seattle Kraken on Wednesday, and then the Buffalo Sabres on Saturday at 1 p.m. The Seattle Kraken game is an 8:30 p.m. Central Time puck drop on Wednesday night because it's a TNT game. Ugh. TNT game featuring the Wild and the Kraken. Too bad you can't flex them. Too bad the NHL can't flex games like the NFL can, because I would flex that in a heartbeat. But that's what you have coming up. So, you should win. You should win 3 out of the 4 at the least. And it feels like you got to get at least 1 point against the Los Angeles Kings. These are all beatable teams. These are teams that are below you in the standings, regardless of if you have the offensive firepower or not. You got to find a way to win 3 out of 4. Let's talk about this a little bit. I think Billy gets 6 to his stomach with Rossi on this team. Too small, needs to be 6'5". I talked about this in a previous episode. Like, let's just play through a doomsday scenario here. Just get it out in the open. Let's say that the Wilds, they do end up hanging on to a playoff spot. So they get into the postseason and they get bounced in the first round because there's not an appealing matchup amongst any of the teams that the Wild would play. And you have all of these players that are locked into these deals. They're not immovable, but not only would Billy have to get permission from many of these players to shop them, he also would have to show the willingness to do so. And he hasn't yet. So let's say he opts to stick with those guys. The only player that you really have on the roster that is movable, that has substantial value, is Marco Rossi. So there is a scenario in which the Wild get bounced in the first round and Craig Leopold tells Bill Guerin, all right, the dead cap hits are gone. The excuses are out the window. You got to win now. You got to win right now. That Bill Guerin then takes Marco Rossi and uses him to acquire some player that helps you win now. And then I think in that scenario, if that happens and it doesn't work out, then I think Billy's probably gone. And I don't like to do the doom and gloom stuff, but I think what I'm trying to say is, like, this is starting to get to, like, you're not you're not backed up against the cliff where your heels are sticking off the earth, and you turn and you look and you see water, like a long drop to the water. You're not quite at that point yet, but you are at the point where you're starting to back up, I think. Because you've got Kaprizov's deal, the negotiations of which are going to start this coming off season. And you just have a lot of bloat on this roster that it feels like is going to need to be cut. And that is going to require Bill Guerin to admit that some of this group that he put together is not getting it done. I have not seen any indication that he is willing to do that, considering that he has doubled down. He's doubled down on this group twice since locking them all in together. He's doubled down on them 2 different off seasons. So think about any normal situation. Think about any situation that you would go through in everyday life where you have a particular thing that you are staunchly in agreement with. You stick to your guns. If you think it's the right way to go, you stick to your guns no matter what. And I'm just worried that we're going to get to the point that Bill Guerin is going to put all the chips on the table, and it's going to be the wrong move. Now, that is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is Kirill Kaprizov re-ups. Bill Guerin, having waited until Kaprizov's deal is inked, locks Rossi in, and Guerin cultivates the roster a little bit. That is certainly possible too. I'm just going off of what we've seen and what I have observed following this team over the last. This is already 5 years covering this team, following this team, being the pulse on this team. I feel like there's certainly a scenario where that all just falls into place, and then it's like, we were all worried about all this stuff going on, and it never turned out that way. But I don't know. It's on a knife's edge right now. It could go one way, it could go the other way entirely. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess. But the big takeaway from tonight, I think, is just the lack of finishing for this Minnesota Wild roster. If you got to find a way to hammer home some of these goals, and it starts by going to the net, getting in close, and just continuing to pepper away. Very beatable goalies coming up. None of the teams that the Wild are playing here upcoming have dominant goalie play, other than, I would say, the Kings. Jordan Binnington is very beatable. Whoever the Seattle Kraken put in net, very beatable. And the Buffalo Sabres, their goaltending combination is very beatable too. You just have to find a way to make these. You just have to find a way to challenge these goalies. Challenge these goalies in close, and just continue to pepper away from them, and fire away. That's what it thank you. Put the biscuit in the basket. What do they practice at practice? Well, Diane, there is no practice tomorrow for the Minnesota Wild. That was just announced by the team on social media. The Wild will not hold practice or media availability tomorrow. They will conduct a morning skate on Saturday before the game against the Blues, but no practice for the Minnesota Wild here tomorrow. So, well, beyond that, any thoughts? Let's Tell you what, since he just popped in, ladies and gentlemen, Denny has joined the chat. Denny, I was just about to sign off here in a little bit. Let's get your takeaways before I do, though, Denny, about the game here tonight. What did you see? What did you think of tonight's effort against the Rangers? Denny also has calculated out that there will be $22 million to work with for the Wild this offseason. Some room to maneuver, which will be nice. But there are some extensions that will be factored into that as well. From Denny, effort was lackluster. Kirill for Rempe and future considerations. Oh boy, yuck! That would not be great. The team is definitely missing Kaprizov very badly. Just a lot of issues with finishing on shots in close. The total breakdown again for the Wild, they had 42 unblocked shot attempts. 11 of them were medium danger and 3 were high danger. So again, that perimeter stuff, 28 low danger attempts out of the 42. A lot of that perimeter stuff. Get to the net. Get right to the front of the net and just lather, rinse, repeat. Put all 3 offensive players within a foot of the net and just let the defenseman just rain shots down on them. I don't know. Don't do that, but do something. Well, doesn't matter how good your players are if they're always injured. Looking at you, Kirill, Ek, Spurgeon, Brodin. You can't help out the team in the tub. I think that was Mike Zimmer that said that quite regularly when he was head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. You can't help the team if you're continually on the trainer's table. And it's unfortunate too. Some of these injuries are just freakish. Like I don't attribute it to being injury prone in some cases. It's more so just being unfortunately unlucky. But it's just the way she goes. I'll get this one from Hoptics, and then it's time for me, I think, to go to bed. Hartman with 3 points in the last 5 games, winning faceoffs, drawing penalties since returning, and playing with some. I think he obviously has plenty of attention on his play, so hopefully has taken that to heart. I guess we'll wait and see. I'm not going to certainly anoint a player as a fully changed man after a couple of games, but it has certainly looked better since Hartman came back. So again, no postcast on Saturday because I'll be in the throes of a college hockey playoff game. So enjoy the debacle against the Blues. Those games are always kind of a mess, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was again. But appreciate everybody tuning in for tonight's postcast. It was good to be back in the saddle once again for this one, and I will try to mix in as many postcasts. It's been tough with high school sports. Obviously, section playoffs going pretty much every night here over the last couple of weeks. We're nearing the end of that road. So should be able to get back to some regular postcasts here within the next week or so. So stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your night. Minnesota Wild get 1 of 2 against the New York Rangers. We'll have an episode for you tomorrow breaking down what John Hines had to say. We'll also take a look at the St. Louis Blues as well, who somehow find themselves close-ish to a playoff spot. We'll talk about that and plenty of other topics. Who knows? Maybe somebody's going to start skating tomorrow too. We'll find out. But that'll do it for tonight's postcast. Minnesota Wild fall 3-2 in OT. And this has been yet another Locked On Wild postcast. Make sure to subscribe if you have not already so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We have them for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.